And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Heather, you want to start us off, please?
Sure. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So I'm going to make my comment. All right. So as Chair of the Board of Education, I want to acknowledge the Board of Finance Chair's request that we further review our proposed budget. I want to be clear that this budget has already gone through several levels of review with the Superintendent and the Finance Director. They've examined reductions, efficiencies, and alternatives that what was before you reflects the minimum funding we believe is necessary to meet our educational and statutory responsibilities. We understand the pressure to reduce costs, and we share the goal of being fiscally responsible. However, additional reductions at this point would not be administrative or abstract. They would directly affect staffing levels, student programs, and support services, and would also place us at risk of falling below standards required to maintain district and school accreditation. Accreditation is not optional, and it is not symbolic. It is tied to staffing ratios, program offerings, student services, and instructional quality. Reductions beyond this proposal would move us closer to non-compliance in areas that are closely reviewed by accrediting bodies. We remain open to continued discussion and transparency beyond this budget, and we believe the proposal before you represents a responsible balance between fiscal restraint and our obligation to provide a sound, accredited education for our students. We look forward to continuing to work collaboratively with the Board of Finance and appreciate the opportunity to clarify the rationale behind this budget. On a personal note, I find it necessary to clarify that I do not report to another board chair, nor do I require instruction on how to perform my role. Any attempt to assert such authority is inappropriate and inconsistent with accepted governance practice, and I expect that distinction to be respected going forward. Thank you. All right. Well, you're going to start with number 5A with the school finance. Citizens comments. We will start on Zoom. I don't see any on Zoom. Any citizens comments in the room? All right, so moving forward to number 5, Board of Education budget meeting number 2. We're going to start off with the Connecticut School Finance Project. This is Erica. She's going to be giving us some information. I appreciate you making the travel out here.
I first want to just apologize. It's a ride to you all. And I'd like to point out the irony that until 3 years ago, I lived in Willimantic, and this would have been so much easier, and then I moved to Litchfield. It's a journey.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So I do apologize. There was an accident in Hartford, and you know how life goes. So I do have, I don't know if you all had a printed packet or not.
No, not yet.
I don't know if I printed enough.
Thank
you. I might have to ask you to share a little bit.
I have one digitally.
Oh, yeah. That's nice to meet you.
Good to meet you in person.
Welcome.
Thank you. Here you go. Here you go. Here you go. Here you go. Thank you. And would you like one?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
And I can give you one if you'd like. And I'll actually have one to narrate. I apologize, I'm losing my voice, and this is not great because I'm leading a conference this weekend. So can you all hear me? Do you need me closer to the mic? Or? Okay, great. So let me first tell you a little bit about our organization, the work we do, and then I'll walk you through the packet. So the School and State Finance Project has been around since 2015, and we were formed really to look at how Connecticut is funding schools and to advocate for equitable funding. At the time, we were doing block grants. and we had a formula that we weren't using. Now we have a formula that's fully funded, and we'll talk about that, and that's some of the work that we do. So we work on issues of education finance. I have the privilege of working across the state, as you can tell. Like tonight was the perfect point. Educating folks on how school finance works at both, the state and local level. Policy changes that are on the horizon. We, as an organization, write policy and advocate for change. And the policy changes that we have put in place have resulted in about $750 million in additional K-12 funding over the last 7 years or so. So we do the work, and it's mattered. And I started this work as a parent of 4. I'm also now a grandparent of 2. And my oldest is 31. My youngest is 16, so I'm still doing this. So we ride this ride together, right? So tonight we're really going to talk about the state funding mechanisms and how the state gets money to you all and what that means for your community, right? And what you're left with. And I think it's an incredibly important year to understand that. We've had a funding formula in Connecticut since 1988. This year is the first time it's fully funded. But what that means is there is no increase in state funding coming. And that creates some tensions on the local level. Certainly some policy change opportunities, and so we'll talk about that. I'll walk you through this. You can tell I've been doing this since 2016. I'm a mighty team of 2 as of 18 months ago. Before that, it was just me. We have community members and advocates in more than 75 communities across the state. So we're a mighty team of 2. The organization as a whole is about 13 people. So I want to just start out with an overview of kind of spending for education, K-12 education in Connecticut. And in total, right, what we're talking about right now is annually in Connecticut, we're spending about $13.7 billion. And you see 3 main buckets of that. And the smallest bucket of that is federal funding. And if you were to look on this, on page 4, I think it's slide 8, what you're looking at from the federal government is about 8.2% of our K-12 funding. I just want to note that includes the ARPA COVID relief dollars. The usual percentage is roughly 4.2 to 4.4%. And so that's an important note because you're going to see that drop. And really what you're seeing is about 57% of education funding is from local sources. That's property taxes in 169 municipalities across the state. And our state invests about 35%, right? So we have a disproportionate reliance on local property taxes. And you all feel it, your Board of Finance feels it, we feel it as residents, right? So I want to break out what that looks like when we talk about Thompson and when we look at comparable communities. And so that, if I can direct you to slide 10. What we're looking at is a comparison of Thompson, Pomfret, Woodstock, and Eastford. And we'll walk through each of these just to get a sense. You're seeing the same breakout of federal, state, and local dollars. So the local dollars are in green. And below each community, we're looking at student demographics. And in part because we have a weighted funding formula, and so those weights matter, those percentages matter. And it's important to identify communities that are similar to you. And sometimes we're looking at geographic neighbors because it helps to understand they may or may not be similar. So we try to identify similar communities, but that doesn't mean they're you. And I want to point that out because there are differences too. So in Thompson, you're spending $24,079 per pupil. And I also want to note, just as a point, data at the state lags from data at the local level. And so you're going to be like, we have different numbers. You definitely have different numbers, and you should. There is a data lag. We use data from the state, so our data is behind your data, and I just want to identify that. To make it even more complex, the state doesn't release all of their data at one time. It filters in, so we update as we can with the most recent available information.
Are you talking about months or years behind?
You're over a year behind. Yeah, and the funding formula actually runs a year behind too, so we can talk about that. But the percentage of kids in your community that are identified in the formula as low income, those are kids who qualify for free or reduced price lunch, and right now 44%, right? Multilingual learners, you have 1.8%. Students with disabilities, and this is like a really important piece to, I'm going to kind of asterisk this because it's not in the funding formula. So we'll come back to this, but it's about 21%. And we also identify BILPOC students, that's Black, Indigenous, Latino, or other people of color that students self-identify. We have a racial funding gap in this state that is about $750 million as well. So we try to track that because districts are disproportionately affected by that. And when you look across, I said you're spending about $24,079 per pupil. You can look at Pomfret at $22,000, a little over $22,000, Woodstock at not quite $20,000, and Eastford at $22,000. The headline on this slide tells you that the state average is about $22,000, and that y'all are spending about $2,000 more. I would like to note an average is not a target, and that I want to level set there. We have per pupil spending in this state that in any given year ranges from about $16,000 to somewhere between $45,000 and $55,000. So an average is an average, not a target number, and I think sometimes people use it differently, and I just want to identify there's a lot of information in that average. So we'll move on. I'm going to tell you how you get money from the state. We have in Connecticut what is called an education cost sharing formula. This is how the state determines how local school districts, I got you, and regional school districts get their funding from the state. And there are a few components I'm going to walk you through, but I want to start with why we have this. And this goes back to a lawsuit in 1977. And at the time, the state was funding every municipality equally. So look across the state and everybody was getting the same. And the lawsuit said that that actually didn't take into consideration what differences we have in community wealth, and that the state's role was really to look at this equitably and to provide equitable aid. So that ruling came in 1977. The first iteration of the education cost sharing formula occurred in 1988. These formulas were implemented always in phase-ins, generally 10 years, and we never made it through a 10-year phase-in. So at some point, the phase-in would be discontinued and block grants were utilized. And I think what happens then is this discombobulated funding system, right? Where the formula would also change. So the components that we have currently in the formula are not necessarily the ones that we started with. So systems were starting over and over and over again. So in 2017, a new formula was passed. It was implemented starting in fiscal 18. And this is the one that it was actually a 10-year phase-in. Community advocacy and legislative work led to a shortened phase-in. So the first time ever is this year that this formula has been fully funded. And that's exciting. But we need to talk about how do they figure out, right? How do they figure all of this out, and how do they decide how much you all can afford to pay? So if I tell you that they need to figure out with this, and it's essentially utilized to figure out how much education costs in any given community, and then how much your community is able to contribute to that. If we're gonna figure out how much it costs to educate kids, we need to kind of build some sort of foundation, right? So the legislature set in 2013 a foundation amount. And this foundation amount is what you would consider the cost it would be to educate a child who has no unique or additional learning needs, a general education student. That number is $11,525. 2013 was the last time it was adjusted. If that number had been adjusted for inflation, it would be almost $16,000. And I will tell you, I don't think any of us, as we're all doing that quick math in our head, right? Of like, even if you took a classroom of 20 kids and you're looking at 11,525 and you're looking at educator, curriculum, space, transportation, it doesn't work, right? So the legislature said that. It hasn't been adjusted. And so that's where the formula starts. And then if you flip to page 8 of the packet, which is slides 15 and 16, if we start there, we do know that all kids are not the same. I told you I have 4, right? I would love if at least 2 of them would get on the same page sometimes and be similar. So we know kids are coming to school with different and unique needs. The formula looks at that and looks at a couple of key things. And the first is kids who qualify for free or reduced price lunch, defined as low income. And for that, they identify a 30% weight, saying that it costs about 30% more to educate kids who come from economic disadvantage. In communities that have more than 60% of their kids identified as receiving free or reduced price lunch, there's a concentrated weight. That is not you. And then for multilingual learners, it takes about 25% more. And I want to note that these numbers, there is not a whole body of research in academia to back up these numbers, right? And the same with the foundation weight. And it is one of the challenges. Like, Harvard doesn't publish a foundation weight. Nobody publishes the foundation weight and says, adjust for your neck of the woods. And it creates a struggle. And this is also a political process. The legislature sets this. And that creates vulnerabilities as well. So when you look at this, you might be looking at this and going, some of these weights don't seem quite right. And I think that's fair. But money does matter. So if you look at slide 16, you're seeing that for a general education student, we talk about 11,525. These weights are not like one or the other, right? They're not exclusive. So when you start looking at a child that is both qualifying for free and reduced price lunch and a multilingual learner, the difference is over 17,000, right? We're understanding that it's going to cost the school systems more to educate kids who have additional needs. So that's That's where this kind of starts and lands. We are going to look at what that means for your community, but I want to talk about the other side of this, because the two sides of this are, first and foremost, we're going to math the math and take the numbers of kids in this community, their needs, and identify what the state says it's going to cost to educate kids in Thompson. And then on the other side, the state is going to calculate, essentially, how much can you pay? And how much does the state need to pay? And if you look at slide 17, the ratio is there. It's called the base aid ratio. And the state looks 70% at property wealth, at your equalized net grand list per capita, right? How much taxable property do you have? And then 30% at income wealth, median household income. How much can people in your community afford to pay in property taxes? And they do that at that 70-30 ratio. Prior to this iteration of the formula, it was actually at a 90-10 ratio. So that has changed significantly. So with that, we're going to flip and we're going to look at, well, what does this mean? I'm going to grab a drink. Because if I lose my voice, I'm going to let down a couple hundred people on Saturday, and that won't be good.
It's not good at all.
So we're having a State of the Student Conference. It's our second annual one. And it covers all the topics of K-12, and it's fun. So let's talk about what this means for Thompson. And as I get old, right, I'm like looking at the, like if you all aren't like moving the slide, like I'm just gonna own it. And I'm gonna do this, and my son makes fun of me. That's what kid number 4 does for you, right? It's like, so the resident student count, 827 kids. You have 372 that qualify for free or reduced price lunch. You have 19 multilingual learners, and you do not meet the concentrated poverty threshold. But essentially, and I want to flag this as I say this, I want to be very, very clear. The state says, with the glasses, that you're going to spend slightly less than $11 million to educate your kids. I'm going to tell you your budget definitely doesn't look like that. It doesn't. I haven't met a community that like looks like that, right? And flagging previously, special ed, we still will talk about it, but that is nowhere in this formula, right? So I want to put that asterisk there. So the state says essentially, I'm going to round up and say 11 million. That's how much it's going to cost to educate your kids. They're going to look at your equalized net grand list per capita, and where you fall is below the median, right? You're at like less than 159,000. And the state median is a little over 190,000. And they're looking at your median household income at like, what is that, like 95? You're below the 102 median. They look at a couple of other things. You all are an alliance district. And I want to identify this as just such an anomaly because you are an alliance district because you are actually grandfathered in, because the law actually is 1,000, a district of 1,000 or more, but you were 1,000 or more when you were identified as an alliance district. And the alliance district comes with some pros and cons. They change how you get your ECS grant, and it becomes alliance. But also it protects you if there are losses, right? You're stable. So I wanted to identify that. And what you're seeing in the Public Investment Communities Index is for the 19 most impoverished communities or in most economic distress, there are some additional weights to the base aid ratio. But essentially, the state says, like, look, out of all that, we need to pay you about 34% of your cost, And so our full grant to you is a little less than 4 million. So 11 million, we're gonna do 4, you guys are responsible for the rest. It sounds really clear and easy. And we haven't talked about special ed. So when you all are building a budget, and I know you know this, but it's important to anchor in this, right? What does this mean? It means that your share comes from property taxes. When you build a budget for the schools, I do want to also asterisk this. Until last year, you pretty much knew what you were getting at the federal level. That is less stable over the last year and a little unpredictable. And I want to acknowledge that. But typically, you know what your federal grant is fairly stable and predictable. You typically know what your state grant is. It's at this point very predictable. There was a new law passed last year that says they have to let you know what it's looking like for next year in January, and in part because legislative session doesn't end until after you all do your budget. And so if things are rocky, you need a heads up, and that wasn't happening until this year for the first time. So, and so what you're left with is the local or municipal contribution that says this is what it's going to take to deliver education to the kids of Thompson. And we have an over-reliance of property tax in Connecticut. We rely heavily on property tax. And it's there's an irony there in that in the beginning I told you in 1977 there was a lawsuit that said, hey, like we all don't have the same wealth, right? And if you look at the range of wealth currently on slide 26, and this has grown, the municipal fiscal indicators were released about a week ago, so we don't have that embedded in this yet. But with this slide deck, there's about $70 billion in property wealth difference between our most property wealthy community and our least property wealthy community. And so what that means is that property taxes vary immensely. And so if you look at the next, we can slide to slide 27 and 28. You're seeing Greenwich's equalized net grand list per capita right now is at about 842,000, and you see you all at 141,000, and you see what the quiet corner looks like, right? And I will tell you that with the most recent numbers, Greenwich is more nearer to 1 million. The growth in that space has been immense, right? And that means there's this broad differential. And so if you look on slide 28, that's a map of property tax differential. And you can see it a little bit more on the western side of the state. And we just took a $350,000 home. But if you look at what a $350,000 home in property taxes would be in Greenwich, it's not $3,000. But in Waterbury, it's $11,000, right? And when you think about that, and you say, well, you can't buy a $350,000 home in Greenwich. It's fair. You could buy $1 million home and still pay less in property taxes than you would on a $350,000 home in Waterbury. And this is a problem across the state. Hamden is higher than Waterbury, and you see it. And so it matters, right? This reliance on property taxes matters. And then we layer on this cake special education. And so special education, until 2025, right? So last year we passed a law in the state actually creating a funding path for special education. Until last year, we were one of very few states the last I knew, we were in the company of Arkansas, West Virginia, and Rhode Island. And to be fair, Rhode Island is like part of us. It makes sense, right? But it's not a great space to be in. And to be clear, special education numbers are growing and costs are growing. And what we did in 2025, and I will hit on it, but it's not a game changer. And it's a start. Everything is a start. So how do we fund education, special education? Mostly they say it's part of your ECS grant. They say it's in there. That money is also for special education. And I can't tell you where, right? I actually just don't have the mechanism because it's not identified. The state just says that's where it also is. So that's the primary funding path for special education. We have excess cost grant. And what that means is once you have spent 4.5 times what your per pupil average spend is, you can submit for a reimbursement from the state at those costs above the 4.5 times. That fund is not fully funded, so you don't get reimbursed fully for that. And it varies, it's unpredictable, because it depends how many claims go into that and what they can pay out. For a long time, they were paying about 70 cents on a dollar. In recent years, that dropped. It moved a little back again, but it doesn't give you great predictability and confidence in budgeting. And in 2025, they added $40 million for excess cost. It changed the reimbursements from where they were, which was landing at about 50 to 60 cents, and it moved those back up to about 70 cents on the dollar, right? So that additional funding actually just stabilized the underfunding, if that makes sense. And they created what they call a seed grant, and it is special education and expansion development grant. And in kind of the design of this, and actually I'm going to spring you to slide 33, and I don't mean to mess you up, Danielle, I'm sorry, and then we'll spring back. But what it did in theory is said, okay, ideally what we'd like to do is fund special ed at, like, if it sat in the ECS formula, we'd want to do a 50% weight, which is great. It doesn't have to sit in that formula to be a 50% weight, right? We can design it and we can articulate it with legislation. In order to do a 50% weight for school districts, it would cost about $190 million. We funded it with $30 million, which doesn't cut it. I actually, it doesn't cut it. And in the seed grant, and I want to acknowledge this because I think it has a much greater impact on the quiet corner. I've been talking to Woodstock, I've been talking to Stafford, I've been spending way time up here talking. Small districts are feeling the constraints of the seed grant, and I really want to speak to that in just that it isn't like an extra just bucket of money. There are restrictions with how you can spend it or how you cannot spend it. And for small districts, those constraints are felt more significantly. For instance, there are constraints on using that money for I want to say contracted services is the best way to say it. You might have needs that are not a full-time employee position. Contracted services, meet the needs of students. But that is up for debate with the seed grant, and generally what I've seen is small districts having a struggle using the money for that.
Yeah, so we are having a problem of getting a teacher, so we've gone to contracted services to hire a teacher. So
Yeah.
that gives us obviously, an unapproved use of those dollars.
Yep. So you are also experiencing that, and so I want to acknowledge that, and then we can flip back to let's just talk about slide 31 for a second, where they say it's in ECS. And prior to 1995, there was a separate line item in the state budget for special education. In 1995, the legislature said, let's not do that. Let's merge it. Let's pour it into ECS. So they assume at this point that about 23% of ECS funding is attributed to special education expenditures. But that doesn't help you because there's not an additional bonus 23% line item in there. So that's a problem, and that's a huge problem. And then you can see on slide 32 the shortfall of excess cost and fiscal 25 specifically. And we're monitoring it because, again, I think there's going to be a shortfall. It hasn't been legislatively full funded. But again, the amount of shortfall is based on the totality of claims across the state. And so, claims don't come in September. Claims are coming in now. You all are hitting 4.5 times and being able to start seeing that. So, we have our standard what people can do. I want to just, and there's some details in here on the growth of across the state, growth of special education students, and a lot of that is attributable to getting more knowledgeable about identification. Costs are skyrocketing, absolutely skyrocketing, and that is a challenge. And I think one of the things I just want to identify too is that special education is the area that you don't control. You don't control, and you cannot tell a student, too bad, that's too expensive, find a different accommodation. You can't say, sorry, we're maxed out on special ed, try again next year. Right? You don't have that, and you also don't have the flexibility of knowing, right? It's not a 1-for-1. When kids graduate, new kids coming in aren't that same group, right? And they have different needs, and costs continuously fluctuate. And so I think it's part of the thing that is most challenging for, I think, boards of ed, and for folks to understand. That's where you're seeing the biggest cost drivers, generally speaking, and at the same time it's where you don't control fluctuation, and I want to acknowledge that. So overall, I think there are a couple of key things that we're working on. 2 key things, but the one that will affect you the one that will affect you significantly is we're working on an inflation adjuster for the foundation amount, so that foundation amount will finally have an inflation increase annually, because your budgets increase annually, and when the foundation amount and everything that falls from that doesn't get considered, you guys, I mean, you got to be seeing it just in your healthcare and benefits, special ed, right? And then your utilities and these things that are not being increased anywhere, and where it sits currently is going to be in the community. There's no other pathway. And so that inflation adjuster in law would be important because it would be there. Much like the foundation amount, and that we don't have to go back year after year, it would be there. And I think that's the most important thing. It's the most it's the most valuable across the state for every community. It matters. It matters for kids. So, we have a mailing list. You're welcome to sign up. I think on slide, I'll identify it for you. On slide 3, there's a QR code, and it's also on our website. This is an app, and it tells you what our per pupil spending is, what other communities' per pupil spending is, what demographics are, what outcomes are, right? And it's in your hand, and you can do that at the district level, and you can also do that at the school level. So if it's information, my contact information is in there. You are more than welcome to reach out to me. We have a data team that is brilliant, and I encourage questions. I encourage a stump the data team kind of effort and support that. That's what we do, and we're happy to do that. And if it's advocacy, you can sign up for our mailing list or let me know, shoot me an email and say I'd like to be on the email list so that I can be informed. And we'll keep you informed of legislative advocacy opportunities. I will also say this, discussion is the absolute most important thing, right? People don't want to hang out and talk about school finance. Like we tell everybody, we're like, best thing you can do is start talking about education funding, but it is. And everybody doesn't have to agree on the right solution, the right answer. I think we agree that there's a challenge, and you're feeling it. And so, if there is something that you question as far as proposals, you're wondering what it would look like for you, let me know. We aren't done yet, but we're doing the town runs for the proposal of the inflation adjuster. So what would that mean to you, ballpark? We're doing that. So we have that information. This is what we do, and we're happy to help.
Thank you.
I have one little question. So could you explain the hold harmless? Because we've been in that place for quite a while.
Okay, this is a two-part question, right?
Okay.
With the Alliance District, you are an Alliance District, and you're like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And generally people see that as a bad thing. You became an Alliance District, but there are some arbitrary measures that you need to understand with the Alliance Districts. One, it excludes districts under 1,000 kids, and that's a lot of districts, right? So there's an arbitrary measure there, and it was lowest, and it still is, the lowest performing districts, but that's all relative, right? As districts move, it wasn't like there was a threshold that you fell below and that is why you were there. It's just relative, and it always has been. The Alliance District program has been expanded and people have been grandfathered in because the one thing that I think is important with the Alliance District is that if your numbers change, if your demographics drop, if your numbers change, you don't get a reduction. You're buffered from a reduction. So that means in statute we have what are, we have, and you saw the formula. You would do the math and go, oh, they lost kids. They have less kids who qualify for free and reduced price lunch. They did a reval and their base aid ratio has changed and we don't need to give them as much. But you are protected from those decreased changes because you are an Alliance District. Important to note, an Alliance District does not give you more funding. It doesn't. And so what happens is, with an Alliance District, your your ECS grant, if you were not an alliance district, your ECS grant would go straight to the municipality and then it would come to you. We have fiscally dependent boards of education. Not uncommon. I think roughly a third, maybe a little more of the states have fiscally dependent boards of education. It means you can't levy taxes, you can't bond, and kind of the town serves as a pass-through for you, right? With an alliance district, what they say, although they've changed the year, and I'm not quite positive on the year until like last year or 2 years ago, they said, listen, any ECS increase you would get over funding of 2012 comes to the district as an alliance grant. And they've moved up that 2012, so it is a little bit more current. But it comes to the district as an alliance grant. So the base ECS that you always got goes to the municipality, then comes to you. The increases in ECS come to the district directly in the form of an alliance grant. And what that means is you have to jump through hoops before you get that money. You have to submit a plan of how you're gonna change things, how you're gonna use the money. And until the state Department of Education gives you the thumbs up on that plan, you don't get that money. But it's not additional money. Other districts who aren't alliance districts just would have seen that as a straight up ECS increase. So I want to make that clear because I think there is a misperception that when you're an alliance district, you get additional money, and that doesn't happen. But you don't lose, which is important too.
Matt?
Did you get a clarity of that?
I have questions.
Please?
I didn't hear address hold harmless as a comment.
So the hold harmless is that we don't get our ECS reduced from year to year.
You don't lose your money.
Okay, yeah.
Other towns do, so there's some volatility. And for small districts, and that was kind of the like thing, right? You are a small district and you're going to experience a lot of volatility, but being an alliance district means you don't lose, which is a really stable place to be.
I have two unrelated questions.
Okay.
You may or may not have the answers to either of them. A, what other funding mechanisms do other states do that we don't do? Obviously, you said we're very property tax dependent. What do successful states do?
So we're one of two states without a county form of government.
Right.
And counties are leveraged, right? And that mechanism of having counties aids in the funding of school districts. It's us in Rhode Island. Again.
Again,
And you know, I mean, you guys feel that differently because you're right there, but yeah. So you know, when you look at economy of scale and you look at fund distribution a little differently, the county form of government is pretty key in leveraging that. I think the other thing, and it's kind of along the same line, is we have some really small school districts. You guys are small. And we have significantly smaller school districts. We have school districts with less than 100 kids. It costs a lot the smaller you are.
Yeah.
It does, right? So I think that, you know, I'll be bold standing up here and saying that I understand that. And actually, being a resident of Eastern Connecticut my entire life, it's something that this area of the state looks at and thinks about and actually executes in different ways. And in some states, I mean, in some areas of our state, it is something that is just like people can't talk about. But looking at how you can collectively work together, dare I say regionalize, is important. And I'm not suggesting that a regional school district is necessarily the answer. We have a lot of work to do in our regional school district laws in Connecticut and how that works. But thinking about how to gain economy of scale, it is a huge piece of it.
So can I ask a question related to that?
Of course.
So my colleague that we've been talking, my colleague in Putnam, Steve Rio, did an analysis, and he talked about the incentive around regionalization, and then he took a look at then we might lose the hold harmless, and if you calculated that out, it actually works against us.
Oh, I'll share with you anecdotally. My son is a part of new Region 20, a newly regionalized district. It actually was a regional district, and then it regionalized some extra. And and in that, there were some significant challenges. And I think that, there are challenges for you particularly, right, in the hold harmless. I think that we have work to do as a state around incentivizing regionalization, because there is a tipping point where it does matter.
Right.
And he did that work, right? There are tipping points where there are ways to incentivize. But the other thing right now is that, and you all see this with Parish Hill and the challenges in this side of the state of it's not working, right? Scotland wanted out of that region and was unable to get out because the regional school district laws they aren't flexible. Once you're in, you're in. And we've got to change that too. Because I think there are things that work well. Proportionality of paying is equitable. It's built in there, but there's still a lot of work to do. I'm hopeful that becomes one of the next policy issues. I also will say one of the policy issues, and there are a couple of just, if you can't tell, we're nerds. I am a nerd. I'm standing in front of you saying all of these math things. Math was not my favorite subject. I think I'm allergic to math. But there are things that we need as a state as far as data collection policies. Connecticut has one of the largest growing 504 populations, which also fit in under special education, but are not reported in the data. So you don't see the number of 504 students that you have, nor do you see associated costs with 504s. And it is also one of those areas that you all don't have flexibility with, and yet it's almost invisible in your budget. And so we have work to do on just getting the data in order to get the funding correct, right? Just for some of these things, we don't have enough information. Multilingual learners, same challenge. We don't have enough data to get the appropriate funding amount. And if you look at Wyndham, Danbury, a couple of other, they're at more than 1 in every 3 kids being multilingual learners. Districts have 70 or 80 different languages being spoken in a district. There are significant challenges, and there are significant, beautiful things that are happening here. Hopefully I answered all the. I threw in the extra 504. That was a bonus.
Any other questions for Erica? Matt?
Is it a lack of money or a lack of will to fund the education on a state level? I mean, it seems like Connecticut, with all its billionaires and trillionaires, should have some more money than we do. Obviously, there's plenty of poor people in Connecticut, in the cities and in the rural areas, but there's also, there's some money floating around. Is it a lack of will, just like on the federal level, or is it a lack of money?
All right, Matt, I see you. So there are a couple of things, right? I think Connecticut has always lived with the fear that if you change the tax structure in Connecticut, speaking of the pockets of wealth that we have, that folks will leave the state. And Massachusetts just did a massive tax change and is taxing wealthy folks at a much changed rate, and people are not leaving. But we've all heard that, right? And so I think there is that embedded fear. On a state level too, we have a wild ride of a state in just the different communities. Our legislature is suburban in nature and probably on the higher wealth end, right? So when you look at funding policies, it's a challenge to, like, we look in, so for this inflation adjuster, right, a rising tide floats all boats, and that's where funding policy has been most successful. Until this year, I would have told you, and I think our delegation in particular was working to change funding at the federal level, particularly related to special education. That is not a thing right now. And I think, you know, in the state, one of the things we are looking at, and the commissioner is required to do, is to set a rate schedule for special ed service private providers, right? Outplacement tuition, like, and bounding some of those things so you all are less subject to changes. So there's a cost control side, but there is an investment side, and I think it's a challenge. How'd I do?
Fine, you did fine, and yeah, and obviously you answered my question.
Otherwise, I would have fixed it.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. And so I don't have the answers, and I don't have the pulse of the state legislature. But it would seem that, and I don't know how much it would cost. Obviously, they're unwilling to fund what we have already, right? They're unwilling to fund what we have in place, but to have, if it's a state mandate, to have the state fund it. So if it's a state mandate to have special ed funded in a certain way, well, there's special ed paid for. Every kid has got to have their least restrictive environment and all that. The money should follow the student, because, as you know, we have if one student moves in, that costs us $200,000 a year. Out of the blue, that's just a $200,000 hit to our budget.
Yeah.
And we know that, you know that, and the money should follow the kid.
And there are solutions, right? Because, and we proposed a solution a few years ago that was wildly unpopular at the time, I think, because the landscape was different, which is, you know, what is happening in Connecticut with special ed is not that kids are moving into the state, right? They're moving from district to district.
Right.
And it's predictable. It is predictable. On the state level, it's predictable. You're experiencing volatility because we're hyper local, and that creates a significant volatility problem. You can, and I will generalize this and probably do a slight disservice to our policy initiative, which is, like, you can kind of insurance model this, which is, you know, we know what the historical spend is in every town. We know what the state needs to contribute, and you can look at, okay, if a kid moves, that cost can then shift with the kid, right? And you can look at what's that cost in a district over a 3 or 5 year period, and you can actually, when you do that, and because we know that kids aren't coming in, we're not getting flooded, we're just moving around, you can make that really predictable and stable for districts. I think there is that fear of, like, well, what if it's not? What if our district pays more? And you can model it out, and it actually models out really well and very stable. But I think that, when we were proposing it, 2018-ish, there wasn't the need. People were like, oh, that's a problem, but, like, we got this, and we'd rather handle it on our own. And now it's a bigger problem. I think there have to be out-of-box solutions, and I think, like, to kind of the earlier point, people need to start thinking about how to work together differently. I will say, in this area of the state, you've got like dynamic connections, and the superintendents are connected in a way that doesn't happen often. Really looking at how to stabilize your districts. It's really cool to see, and all compliments there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the hard questions. I meant for the data team, not for me.
Yeah, when you're here and they're not.
Justin?
I have one.
Yes.
Great presentation. And this probably goes to your data team. I'm going to give you some data first, and then I'm going to ask you a question. Last year, we were 16th out of 169 districts in special education. This year, we are 40th out of 169 districts in special
16th and 40th in what? In special
Percent.
ed?
In percentage of students.
Highest.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
That percentage has not changed for us. It's 26. It's roughly floated between 25 and 26%. Are you guys doing now? What I see from that is I see a higher need, and towards your presentation, they haven't changed the funding pool that needs coming from, so that overall percentage of reimbursement is going to be lower. Are you guys doing any predictive analysis and putting that data out to say things like I just said? Like I'm looking at it going,
Yeah.
well, this year we might get 64% on the dollar.
Yeah.
Next year it could be 34% on the dollar if they fund it at the same model. Are you guys doing, and this is one small pocket, are you guys doing any predictive modeling
Yes.
to help districts look at things like that?
We are also working with the legislature to look at that, because the reality is they can change that, right? And so those conversations, even though legislative session is this year is very short, right? February to May. Those conversations are ongoing in prioritization and concern identification. So as we get access to data, and we don't always get access to data any sooner than EdSite releases it, like until it's on EdSite. But when we can identify data needs and get access to that sooner, we do that. And when we look at what we're seeing and say, this is what this is going to mean, here's the red flag, we're watching excess cost. We've already started flagging it. So yes, to all of it.
Okay. And have you guys considered a self-reporting system to get that data sooner? Like districts that want to participate in self-reporting?
No, but that would be interesting. So where we've hit a lot of, so
I just got the dagger eyes from Maybe I'll just shush on that one.
no, I'll tell you where the obstacles are, because I do think there are districts who are like, that would be good. The obstacles are, right, everyone from your business officers to your, to special ed directors to like, are so overtaxed that anything more is just like, they're when we talk about what else could we do, there's functionally no capacity.
Right.
Your
and I'm
spare
not,
time, Bill.
No, and I'm not
Are
saying
you
like,
this? Are you?
Thank you, Erica. I think you're the first person who's ever said that.
What's your role?
he's a
Finance
business
director.
officer.
Oh, yeah. Because I'll tell you, and this is where he could look at me, because in 2012 there was a law that went into effect in Connecticut that said by 2015 we have to have a uniform chart of accounts. And yeah, you hear the groan, because I'm a big fan of uniform chart of accounts, because what that means is we can look across districts in a very clear way, apples to apples, right? And it is not 2015. We are way past that, and it has not happened. And it has not happened for those types of concerns that I've articulated, not identifying anyone in particular, and understanding that the reporting and recording, and I identified two areas like finance and special ed have just been increased, and you know what your budget is, so it's not like you're like, oh, we have another mandate, let's add another person. Great. That's not what happens,
No.
and that's what I think is identified as unfunded mandates, right?
And I lived through Unified Chart of Accounts in Rhode Island, and that was heavy lift to
Yeah.
make that all work. And the amount of time that was pressure on the finance director and everybody else
Right.
was, and then all you do is you just, to me, it just looked like a big spreadsheet that you could compare districts.
We would love that.
But in the
Like-
end, it didn't give us anything.
You're talking magic, and I think in fairness, though, right? Connecticut's data displays and transparency are not necessarily the strongest. And to that point, right? If you don't have a method of robust, like, what are the strategies? You know, and we do have, like, we have some dashboards. We have an educator preparation dashboard that tells us where, like, people coming into the pipeline. We can see shortages years in advance, but we aren't able to tangibly strategize what do we do with that, right? And so to your point, if you don't have those connective strategies to build it, then we don't want you to do a lift that is just a feel good for me. I mean, I still want you to do it. I respect.
I have a question about, so we talk about excess cost grants and everything a lot for, you know, like the stuff that happens over or outplacement. Is there any talk at all for legislature or anything about all the costs that are in-house that don't meet the threshold? Because I think that most of our funding actually needs to be like in, because
Correct.
we have 200 kids on IEPs in district, 4 kids out of placement. So 196 kids are getting speech and OT and reading and all these interventions that are not being funded at all.
Yeah. They would say that is the seed grant, that's
It's $60,000.
correct.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that. Because I agree with you. I think, you know, that there is still not a strong, and you know, last year we had the Select Committee on Special Education in the legislature, and that looked at it, and it came out with a comprehensive kind of start. There's a lot of work to do, and there is a lot of collaboration that needs to happen between any select committee, like special education and the education committee, because it all is a piece of it. And I think that there is not a strong, although I will tell you there are going to be advocacy efforts to increase that seed grant. I don't know what the yield is on that. I don't know. I don't think the appetite is there immediately. And I actually think that in the long run, the feedback on the seed grant is actually going to be critical to it being effective, not just because if you put more money in it but you aren't able to use it in a way that actually meets the needs of the district, we need to have both parts of those conversations. My guess is just in kind of the ways of the world, they're going to want to see how that plays out for at least a year before they poke on anything. I think they're going to wait for a lot. And I do hear you on that, because I think when we talk about this, and we've all talked about a lot tonight, the answer is not one thing. The answer is a lot of things. You know, last year we also passed a district repair and improvement program, and that isn't going to get you a lot of money either, but it's another avenue towards funding. And I think we need to think comprehensively about what are the costs of districts and how do we look at incentivization programs for change. How do we really talk about what districts need in a grant that meets their needs for special education. And I think it's a lot of levers. I think it's a hard one right now. I just think we have a lot of knowledge building to do about what special education is or is not, and what you all are required to do, what FAPE is, right? And I think that is both in communities and I think it is at the legislature. I think holistically as a state, we need to have that conversation in order to get the momentum to make strategic investments. Sorry.
It's not your fault. It's just something to think about beyond, because.
But you're right. Yeah. Okay.
Matt?
I have one more thing. It's not a question. It's not a question. I want to thank you. Thank you very much for coming out here all the way from Litchfield. Also, I want to thank our 3 Board of Finance members who are attending here or virtually. I appreciate that, and and I wanted to thank them just in case they left after Erica's presentation. So. And thank you very much again for coming out, and you got to go all the way back now too. So
I listened to a book,
that's how I do it too.
and nobody is actually talking to me. I love it. I'm just going to share, but we've already made a pitch for like an apartment somewhere in the quiet corner. If we keep having to like come out here, I'm like, wait, it would just be easier, and I'm also down for that. So I'll keep coming back, and again. Please feel free to reach out with any questions, and I'm happy to answer. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.
Kathleen, any questions, comments? I'm sorry. The way the screen is, it's to my back and I miss you.
That's okay. I know. I've always advocated for the screen to be over by where the tech guy sits because it's difficult for the chair. But no, I do not. It was an excellent presentation. I think it helped us understand a lot more on how the financing mechanism of the state works. And we've got a lot of, we need to advocate. We got a lot of advocacy to do to the state and to our state legislators. But thank you for arranging this.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, on to part B, budget overview. Mr. Stegos, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. A lot of this will be repetition from last week, but I did want to specifically address a couple of items that came out of last week's meeting. Kathleen had requested to see the total object view. So the last 2 pages of the packet that you have in front of you are just that, the object view. So the prior to that in the package is a duplicate of what you had last week. And the other question we had last week, I believe it came from Heather, was to add the number of positions per code. I actually layered that into both looks, the object view on the last 2 pages and the previous view before.
Thank you.
So you can see, you'll see there's a couple of half positions floating around. I wanted to accurately capture how each position was, fit into the budget, and that's why you see some half positions. But there's a couple notable things in there. 39 paras was one thing that jumped out at me when you looked at the object view. That I think is reflective of just the level of services that are needed.
Isn't that an all-time high?
I think it is, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Melinda and I took a look at these, and these positions are built from the same payroll and benefits supporting information that's in the budget spreadsheet. So hopefully that sheds some light. What struck me was, frankly, in some situations, obviously, if you think about the high school, for example, obviously not a massive school, but when you start talking about having 3 math teachers and 3 science teachers and 3 English teachers and 3 social studies teachers, it's really amazing that they service 160-something kids. All the math classes needed for 160-something kids with 3 teachers in math. And that's what struck me.
So when I first came, we had 5 ELA, 5 math, and 4 other content areas.
But that information has been added, so if that prompts any questions, just let me know. But to recap at a high level, going back to the cover page here, currently we're at a proposed budget of 23.7 million, which is up 1.9 or 1.9 million or just under 9%. As usual, and no surprise here, the bulk of that increase comes from pupil services in response to the special education needs that Erica just mentioned are across the state. That's not a surprise to anybody else. All three schools, the primary drivers are contractual salaries and what is now a 10% health insurance increase. We have not heard any movement on that number yet from our brokers, but we continue to check in. You remember that last year thankfully drifted down from 10%, but so far it hasn't moved yet, but it's not for lack of trying. Other budgets, pretty tight. District-wide, you see a 14% increase there of $277,000. A lot of that is the cafeteria health insurance coming back to the Board of Ed that we've talked about in previous budgets, where there was an attempt in the last couple of years when we had a lot of funding floating around, they were able to carry their health insurance. But doing that now would just push the cafeteria in deficit, which is a game we don't want to play because that deficit ultimately comes back to the board. So I think it should be addressed right up front. Those are really, let me see, transportation. You're at a 4.3% increase. Wait a minute, Bill, they're up 5%. We have a little bit of an offset because of bus route reductions, and we actually were able to buy down our per gallon price of fuel again for 2027. I sound like a broken record on this one, but it's one of the few wins that we see in the budgets. I think this is the 4th year in a row we've been able to do that. It's a modest savings, but it helps a little bit. So very high level, those are the big drivers of the budget. There's a couple things that I would like to mention sort of ahead of the next agenda item. And that's that I'd like to remind the board that this isn't a final budget. This is very much a living document and is in flux due to a few things. And just a couple of examples. And Melinda, tell you, time out if I go too far on this one. But we've very, very, very recently had some development in the pupil services world that might well affect next year.
Correct.
And by very recently, I mean this morning.
Oh, this morning. Oh,
So-
we did more? Okay.
So that's something that we would need to be able to react to. Another bit of bad news, the pension contribution line in the budget is one of these items that we get typically during the budget process. That actually came in this morning. I had budgeted that at $100,000. It's been between $95,000 and $100,000 for the last few years. The actuaries actually filed their report this morning, and that's $121,000. So there's another $21,000 that needs to be addressed. And hopefully what will end up being a good guy, we don't have, as I just mentioned, we don't have a final percentage increase on health insurance. I really hope we see that drift down, and that's a situation where we would be able to reduce the budget. So I think it would be helpful to be able to react to some of those things in both directions, because at the end of it all, we want the budget to be accurate. And I just wanted that out for consideration when you move on to the discussion later on in the meeting.
Yeah, and can I just jump on that for a minute? When we put this budget together, we put it together with the actual expenses that we have and to maintain what we have. We didn't ask for anything new. It is just the very fixed costs that are going up, and then that volatility with special education. So there are no new programs coming. There are no additional teachers being added. It is a straightforward budget just to keep things status quo.
Kathleen?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment about the special education overage for this year's for the 26 fiscal year. When our budget request was cut last year, we went back to Dr. Jones and had him cut what we had originally budgeted for special education in our 25-26 year budget by 400,000. And guess what? We're coming in almost to that exact amount over in our budget. So, we prepare a budget to what we feel, what we honestly believe, what we're coming in on. Our general education budget is spot on. And where it's volatile and where we believed we could cut the budget, we were really in our first budget pass spot on in our special education needs. That's all.
Thank you, Kathleen. Okay. So, yes, Joseph.
Bill, I've been doing some shuffling. If you saw it, this is nothing compared to my desk at home. I pulled the last 2 years of all of our worksheets and things that we've done. If I look back at last year, when we started this process this time last year, we were 22, 398, 630. That's where we were last year at this time with our budget. If we didn't subtract any of the contractual salaries, we didn't do any of that mess to that, and we got the adders that were at the end of last budget season, that brings us to right around 22.7, 22.8, somewhere in that range, by my numbers, right? Mm-hmm. We look at our contractual salary obligations for this year, roughly, I think that's around $450K, bringing us up to about 23 million one. And then our special ed ads so far this budget season, we're realistically only asking for about $265,000 over last year's original request budget, less all the special ed stuff. I know that was a difficult track to follow, but by my numbers and by the shuffling, and if you saw, like I said, if you saw my office, it's a $265,000 net plus over last year. I think, at least where I'm from, where I sit, we have kicked this can down the road. We've bled this stone as much as we're going to bleed it, and we have put off. I mean, we've got this. I've got last year's capital list somewhere in here. We've got stuff that 10 things on a list that we move from year to year to year to year to year to year, and eventually things catch up to us, like the HVAC caught up to us, right? Like the roof catches up to us. And I specifically remember a meeting for the HVAC where the town and the Board of Education was chastised for about 30 minutes straight as to why we didn't plan for this, why we didn't save for it, why didn't we protect the investment of the taxpayers of Thompson. This is why, right? Why? Because we have to provide, per Article 8 of the Connecticut Constitution, a free and fair education. The town has to provide it to the residents of the town. And we're doing it on a shoestring budget. Now, one of the other things that's come out, and Jess, correct me if I'm going ahead of myself here, but there's this list that came out today, and I personally have an appetite for absolutely nothing on this list to go away. Everything on this list is what our district has done to improve our district, and there are things on this list that townspeople have stomped their feet at Board of Finance meetings, they've stomped their feet at town meetings, they've stomped their feet at Board of Selectmen meetings. Our school we need to close the high school and turn it into a vocational school. Well, what we've done in our high school is we've got the best of both worlds. We are putting together pathways, which I don't want to minimalize them by saying they're vocations, but they are allowing a specific population of our student body to get out and become contributing members of tax-paying contributing members of society before they even leave high school.
Yep.
With what's on this list, we will handicap at the knees our district. And whether you're fiscally conservative, whatever you want to call yourself, this list will put our district behind by leaps and bounds. Forget test scores.
Right?
Yep, those will go out the window.
The athletics, to be in an athletic program, you have to keep your grades up. What's the incentive for students to keep their grades up if there's no athletics? What's the incentive for kids to even come to school if there's not something interesting, especially in high school, for them to come to school for? If we didn't push last year's budget and it didn't get cut drastically, we would be asking for, my numbers, about a 0.2, 0.3 mill rate increase this year at the most. So that can being kicked, it's over.
And don't forget that we cut 7 or 8 positions last year to make that number work.
Oh yeah,
Getting there.
I was getting there. It was. I'm glad Jess saw it. I mean, there was 5 positions last year that were eliminated. There was hundreds of thousands of dollars that were cut from plant before we even touched it in this round. There was the benefits from the eliminated positions, and then, you know, when we talk about nickel and diming, I mean, we cut out $138,579 in other decreases, right? To say we don't go through this budget line by line and find every nickel and dime, we do. And for us to sit here again and have to find $5,000 here and $10,000 there, and oh, we're going to cut a $15,000 math lab program, for what? So that we can get chastised next year because our test scores didn't move in the positive direction? We're not doing what we need. Our job as a Board of Education is to educate the students. Our job is to be fiscally responsible with the budget. I believe anything lower than we're currently proposing is not fiscally responsible. In fact, based on the revelations since this budget was originally approved by the Board of Education, I believe we're almost $400,000 in addition to that number that went out. And I get it. There's not an appetite in the town to have a higher mill rate. But we have a job to be fiscally responsible, and we have a job to educate these students. And if we even touch anything on this list, we're risking everything we've built for the last 7 years. I yield.
Okay. Anybody else for discussion?
Justin pretty much said everything.
All of it.
I heard a lot of dittos.
Just,
Melinda?
I just want to say that this was an exercise I was asked to do. I don't agree with any of it. As a matter of fact, I told you last budget go around, I'm supposed to be helping you, guide you through this process, and I have nothing left to give or cut or reduce. I mean, when you hear Heather next week, she'll talk about how we got throwaway computers that we're breaking down to make other computers because we don't have enough money to replace computers. I mean, it is sad. She's pretty creative, but at the end of the day, I mean, think about that. You know, we took some other district's trash and tried to make something out of it to work for our kids so that they have a computer to use in school. It's beyond comprehension at this point on how we're going to move forward unless we keep up with the fixed costs every year.
Kathleen?
Yeah, can I ask a question? I just want to go through this staffing list here. Not that I'm in agreement with you, Melinda, but just to be clear, how many children are presently in the preschool classes?
We had the enrollment sheet. There's probably about 49, 50.
Total.
Yeah, but how many in each class?
How many in each class? There's 12 in the full day program, I know, all the seats are filled. And then AM and PM, I don't have that list right in front of me,
Pre-K
I
was
can get it for you.
44, yeah.
There's
Pre-K.
44 total, and you have to understand about preschool, right? It is early intervention, and so when the kids turn 3, they come in through the special ed door. And so we have to keep spots open because we know we have projections of when those kids are going to enroll. So sometimes the class isn't completely at capacity, but we have the peers that come in and they're either tuition based or they qualify for a free slot depending on if they're school readiness or not. But there's 44 students currently. It doesn't mean that number isn't going to go up.
Right, understood. I understand that. So currently we have 4 classrooms or,
We have 3 classrooms. One is a full day classroom, so those 12 students stay all day. And then we have 2 other classrooms that have 2 morning sessions and 2 afternoon sessions.
okay. So if you would get rid of if we were to say, okay, we're going to reduce a preschool teacher, it would be one of the AM PM teachers.
Correct.
Okay.
And then that would reduce the number of spots for peers to come into the program, because then those slots in the other classes would have to be reserved for students of need, because by federal law, once they turn 3, they have to receive services.
Right. And
I
those
don't
peers,
agree with it, but I'm thinking, Kathleen, I've got to think about what isn't mandatory, and providing preschool for gen ed kids is not mandatory.
correct, because those kids hopefully would be able to go to one of the private preschools in the area.
If their families could afford it.
Afford it, right. And given the poverty rate in this town, that may not be feasible.
50.
Correct.
It's a 50.
And
Okay.
quite honestly, sometimes we take students in, they don't qualify for special ed, but we know that they need early intervening services, so we bring them into our preschool, so long-term, we can correct and provide that early intervention, so that long-term, they don't become students that need additional support.
Okay. And along with that, the preschool para would then go also, because he would not be needed.
Yeah,
Right.
the classroom wouldn't be there.
Right. Okay, so that would be 170 some odd thousand, 170,000 that we could save in the budget.
Not ideal for the community.
No, I'm not saying it is. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it is ideal. I'm just trying to wrap this around my head.
I get it.
Okay. The guidance secretary up at the high school, how many do we have now? 2?
1.
1. So that the guidance counselors would have no secretary.
Correct, but we have 1 secretary of the main office, but I don't believe she could take on the work of the guidance secretary. So then the work of the guidance secretary would fall on the guidance counselor. And when you think about kids' transcripts and everything that's involved with that, but it's not a classroom teacher that we desperately need, so I started to look at what isn't in the classroom.
Correct. I hear you.
Anything else, Kathleen?
No, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Daniela?
My question goes back to preschool. We receive some funding from parents, right? How does?
Yeah, so we receive tuition on a sliding scale for the students that don't qualify for special ed. If they qualify for school readiness, some of them can take those slots. But remember, we increased the one class to full day. And if you look at the literacy data that's coming out of our school, the students that were in full day preschool last year far exceed the kindergarten students that came in without that full day experience from our school. There's one other center that I won't make a name of that also offers full day preschool, and those students who had that experience now are far ahead in kindergarten than every other student that just came in. So the preschool program is having a significant positive impact on, and it's the full day program that's really having the impact on student achievement as they get into kindergarten. And Lindsay could come here and to show you that data all day long because she's quite jazzed about it.
So does that money, is the money that we're getting from the students in the full day program or the half days?
Mostly the half days, unless they have a school readiness slot. Here's the thing about the preschool tuition. We have more children that are on a sliding scale, right? So the tuition generated over time has been less than when I first came. However, we only receive a certain percentage of that tuition money back. The rest goes to the town. So I don't know how much goes on the town side, but I know that number's reduced every year.
Yeah, it's probably around 15 to 18,000 that goes to the town.
And what are we getting?
Well, why does it go to the town
Probably,
and not the
that's a
school?
great question. We've been trying to get an answer
That
on that
makes
one
no
for a while.
sense to
So-
me. If the services are being given at the school, then the money should be going back to the school.
So this kind of goes on the heels where back in the day, excess cost also went to the town, and we had to do some work, if everybody remembers.
Yes, we did.
And get that money back. I think that's the way it was originally set up. This is long before Bill and I arrived, and it's just been kept that way.
Okay. Justin, you had your hand up?
But
It's
something
still
that should be
15
At one point-
grand. It's 15 grand.
Yeah, I mean, did you have something, Matt? You guys can go first.
All right.
I'll
And then, okay, you'll clean up. Matt?
So to follow up on Melinda, so whatever we're spending on full day preschool is going to pay us back threefold, fivefold in general education through
course,
elementary
yep.
school because they're going to be that far ahead, and it's, everything is essentially exponential. What you're building on. So we're saving money by spending we're spending pennies to save dollars.
Correct.
Thank you.
They'll need to wait till citizens' comments, unfortunately.
Isn't part of that teacher's salary also covered under the school readiness? Is
Yes,
it-
a little bit of
Right, so
one
it's
of the
not even
teacher's salary.
like a full elimination.
We get about 100,000 from school readiness, right, Bill? About that.
Okay. You ready to back clean up?
I'll clean up. So, the preschool piece, the preschool piece probably bothers me the most out of this because of what it does, right? It's the feeder to the rest of the program. I also fear that if we do remove that, the preschool teacher and the parent educator lowering the overall enrollment by let's roughly say 11. Let's just say it's 11. I think we're going to pay for that in kindergarten the next year by having to do 2 paras, 3 paras to support the additional needs of what wasn't provided for if those students do decide to feed in at that point.
Because preschool's a lot of social adjustment.
Correct.
Right?
It's that first
Language
experience
development.
it's the first experience without the parents, and from my community outreach, it's probably one of the programs that is the highest rated elementary school program that we like. You don't usually hear any complaints about the pre-K
Pre-K,
program
right.
that we have here. My fear about getting rid of the secretaries, and if we go back to probably mid-year last year's meetings when we were having a whole bunch of power school issues and attendance issues, and I didn't get a phone call until 11 o'clock in the morning that my kid was marked absent. Why didn't I get that? Well, here we go, right?
Correct.
If we
Right.
start cutting
Safety.
secretaries, we start risking some safety, we start risking, there's risk involved with each one of these lines. I think guidance secretary, there's risk involved in being able to help our students prepare their transcripts, like you said, for college applications, being able to help our students with college applications. And God forbid we get rid of some of these other programs, the guidance counselor is going to be needed even more because there'll be less resources to help those students that don't have a path post-graduation.
Plus,
And our
I
whole
can-
point is to graduate successful students that can
Correct.
go off into the world, and if we're kind of just kicking them out the door without
And
guidance, you know, what's the point?
The other function they serve, right, is managing all the scholarships and making sure that kids get that information, you know, displaying that stuff so students can apply, making sure kids have access to Kim Steglitz when they need to. So there's a lot of value there, and I can say that the elementary office would be chaos if we didn't have two people there. And you are right, it is a safety issue. But when I start to look at, we had some of these positions on lists last year. The one thing I didn't put on the list this year that you had last year was a school nurse, and I'll tell you why I'm not putting that on. Because we had an emergency this year with a staff member, and she would not be with us if it wasn't for our nursing staff. So I'm not putting that on there. We need to have access to medical care. You know, and the teacher herself would tell you that. That if it wasn't for being in school, she's not sure that she'd be with us today. So, you know what? We can't take that chance on the faculty, staff, and students by reducing nursing staff. The problem is that for 9 years, we have not budgeted, or we have not received funding that balances the budget on the expenses we had. So what we had to do over time is we had to keep reducing positions. Some of it was warranted because our enrollment dropped here and there, but over time we have got less kids, but kids with more need, and so then that's a whole other issue. So.
Kristen?
I was just gonna say also, some of the positions on this list, that these people are actually filling more than one. One thing that comes to mind is like the play and some of those
Oh,
people
yeah.
helping out with that, so you're losing all the important things they do in their actual role, plus all these other things that they do that they don't have to do for us, so it's hard when you like interact with them all the time and you see all the things they do, and people just like slash them off like they're a line in a budget, and it's just, you know.
Yeah, and I'm always apprehensive about talking about positions because there's a face behind the position,
Exactly.
right? And so, you know, we don't want to get our district in a morale issue. Last year, I will tell you that it was at an all-time low, not because of job satisfaction, but because of lack thereof of community support. It just weighs on people. And you think about, you know, you're a young teacher and you first came in and are fearful that you're going to be the first to go, so then you stop looking elsewhere. And that's how we've lost some really good teachers along the way. Last year, we hung on to mostly everybody, which was a good thing, outside of the people that we had to reduce. You know, but for the most part, no one else left after we made those initial cuts. But if I were a young teacher, I want stability. And I'm going to go to a district that has stability. And then what are we going to do? We're going to lose some of our finest teachers.
Yeah.
Justin, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, so going back to last year, and I just want to refresh everybody's memories. Last year in pupil services one of the budget drivers was $886,000 was the original budget driver last year for special education or pupil services. before we went to present, that we added $277,000 to that number.
Right.
In that same realm, if we were to omit pupil services altogether, our total requested increase last year was $500,000. So if we get rid of if the state magically covered pupil services, right, that 886,000 plus the 277, all we were asking for was around $500,000 as an increase to our overall budget last year. Now we're looking at $700,000 in additional in unbudgeted for pupil services this year. We've offset that by the SECG grant, the IDA, the SEED, but we're right back in the same boat. Mm-hmm. And as we talked about this same time last year, we were a day away from presenting our budget when $277,000 hit us. This year, on Monday night, we approved, on that Monday 2 weeks ago, we approved the budget, and that Tuesday it was $165,000 hit us.
And today, another out-of-district place.
For how much?
We don't know
We
yet.
don't know.
Well, I wanted to finish that because between then and now, we had a dump truck that blew up. We've got a steamer in the middle school cafeteria at $32,000. We've got a serving line that's 70 years old in the middle school that's $70,000, and a leak and a generator which is probably going to cost us somewhere in the 40 to 50 range.
That we originally got for free.
That we repaired 12 months ago to the tune of $26,000. So we're in an aging district with aging issues. Something's got to break, and we cannot continue to break our general education students to get there.
Daniela.
I guess I'd be curious in positions, how much money have we invested into these potential teachers that we're going to get rid of? OG training, all the other things that we've already, we spent money on that. And same thing, if we were to look at cutting any of the programs, the athletics, the track, we just had to have the welding program, which to my knowledge, we will owe money because contractually, EB put in that stuff. I'm assuming we'd break our end of the contract if we were to close the welding program.
Well,
what do we got to pay them back?
They invested in us significantly, right? $250,000 between EB, Synidia, American Welding Society, yada yada. But the bottom line is, I don't know. We made a commitment that we were going to implement the program on a long-term basis.
Right.
So the one thing on the list you'll notice is that we do have permanent subs, and that's where that came from. Why that is volatile is because if we don't have permanent subs in the building, then we need to call subs in on a daily basis like we did before we had the permanent subs. The issue with that is you might not get a sub, and then you're going to be doubling up classrooms because that's typically what happens, or they split classrooms and they put kids in each class, right? The other teacher has to take that on. But that particular line is only going to make the daily sub line go up. So, I mean, we put the permanent subs in years ago for that reason. It's not something I recommend, but it is extra.
Quick question on permanent subs. Is there ever a day that all four are not being used?
Never.
No, that's what I figured. I knew the answer to the question. I just wanted it said out loud.
My thing is we have to also consider all the money we've recently invested and all the money that we've just put out.
Yeah.
That we're willing to now just, it didn't matter.
There's nobody sitting here that wants to do any of this.
No.
So.
And Justin's right. This is the hard work that people did for the last 7 years to build up programming, make sure we're supporting kids appropriately, not lavishly, what they need, and any changes is going to be devastating. And our families, if you're listening out there, parents, you need to rise up at this time, and you need to really advocate for your children because we're at a breaking point.
if I may, have one, sorry. When we look through this list, and I know we're all looking at it at the table, we could, let's say permanent subs, right, $108,000. For staff, $108,000, wiped out overnight. That cost savings, if you will, which I don't ever think it is, wiped out overnight by an outplacement. And I don't want to keep going back to that, but that's the volatility in our budget. We're the scale, the in-out scale that we've got right now doesn't fix the problem that we have. The problem that we have is we have a very high need, and there's no place else to realistically and safely pull that money from. And the gymnastics that our administration is doing already to get us where we are is impressive. To balance a budget as delicately as we are, I know there's town people on the call right now, and I know there's other board members, and I implore you to look through our budget and tell me. Email me, call me, whatever you want. My number's up on the district website. Tell me where it's got to come from, because I don't see it.
I think the little bit we could take here and there is not going to significantly make any changes at all.
Well, you're not gonna get to $1.9 million, that's for sure.
No,
Well, and the number's not 1.9 million anymore.
no,
Right.
no.
It's 2.3.
Right.
I mean, it's not 2.3 yet. It's
Right.
1.9, but everything that's hit us between last time and now, it's 2.3.
Right.
Well, and probably more, but I don't know that number yet.
Okay.
I'm afraid I finally need to speak up.
Okay, Rick.
So I went line by line before the idea with the number of people. I've highlighted everything. If you want to talk about excess. First, I looked at percentages, and I highlighted everything that's 100% or more. I didn't count how many there are, but there's more than a dozen. And I said, well, then I looked at them and said, well, some of those is only a couple $100 or a couple $1,000. A couple are $30,000, $40,000. That's when I started to look then, okay, so where did these lines go up big? So let me start at one other point. It's a challenge, and I think that's why governments fail, is they roll up and they do averages, and it all looks, you can't see where the issues are. So I came back, and then I went page by page and started highlighting, and I just highlighted stuff over $10,000 increase. So then I tried to figure it out. A lot of it's in health, a lot of it's in salaries. But when I see something in here, and this is where I think someone else looking at it besides us is going to go, what are you talking about? So I saw a line that's a 600% increase, but it's in some kind of fees and
Hey, Rick,
tech dues
if
and
I
fees.
might.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the left-hand side, the
Yep.
numbers are the lines are numbered, so
Yep.
you can quickly identify, and I might be able to answer what it
Okay,
is.
so say line 14. I think that's one of the biggest percent increases, and it's not a huge amount of money.
High
But-
school industrial tech dues and fees went from
700 to 4,900.
So I know what that is.
$4,000
$4,000
circled
increase.
too.
Yeah.
So I can tell you what that is. We got grant funding for students to have accounts in American Welding Society. They're per pupil cost, and the grant funding ran out on that, although we're still trying to chase it. But I think it was for 30 students, Bill.
Yep.
I forgot what the per pupil cost was, $30 or something like that.
forget.
It wasn't a lot, but we ended up having to put it in the budget in case we don't get grant funding or we can't use Perkins dollars, which is another grant. So that's why that one went way up.
Gotcha. So then, just just to be sure, so line 38 is 400% increase. It's only $1,800, but that's guidance, dues, and fees for the high school. So some people are going to look at it different. Why is something 500% higher,
Correct.
but it's only a couple $100? In this case, it's a couple thousand. To Daniela's point and all what you have said, some of these won't make a big difference, but they're the nickels and dimes that add up. They may not add up to enough to prevent us from saying you need a couple $1 million more this year to keep the place afloat. Yeah. But, so let me just, new equipment, line 64 in the high school, 200%, it's $2,500.
It's in the
Is it-
culinary.
Okay. So I think that's why folks asked us to be here, so, 400%, line 77, $6,000.
Textbooks, which was something even in high school too.
Well, that's
There's a textbook
instruction
one.
supplies.
Those
Yeah.
aren't gonna be the same every year, though. They don't buy textbooks every year, so
Right.
you might
But
not.
it's instruction supplies, textbooks
Yeah,
is
so
the
you
next
need-
one.
Right,
Right.
so
I'm
you might
assuming
not
we
see
need
that line
textbooks
increase again for
this
like
year.
7
Can
more
we
years.
kick the can
though.
for
It's
another
like-
year?
These aren't textbooks,
not
these are
textbooks.
instructional
They're
supplies.
consumables.
You're a line off.
They're consumables.
Oh, I'm a line off. No, the other one has textbooks.
Yeah.
There's another, high school I
Line.
think has textbooks, math textbooks.
Correct, that's to purchase another class to use the
Right.
CPM model that we're not using, and I forget what course that is, but we have to buy the basic set. And then every year there's consumables after that. And, you know, we had used grant money along the way to kind of pre-buy some of those consumables, but we've kind of used them all now.
My thought was, can we kick the can another year, you know, right? It's minimal money, but can you kick it another year kind of thing? Like, not that I want to, but.
This
The
would
kids
be
need
like
a
not buying
workbook.
the Wilson workbooks in the elementary,
Right.
which you can't not purchase those to run that program.
Right.
So not to interrupt, Rick, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. We've done this before, and it's good that you're doing it. It's good that you're looking line by line. We've looked line by line. I know I have at home, and you see these
Too much.
big percentages.
Yeah.
But it's a big percentage of a small amount.
Right.
You know, so looking at the percentages makes it tough. It makes it
It's
a
a
tough
place to
sell.
start.
But if there's somebody out there,
Yeah,
you
they're
know,
gonna do it.
just looking at this document who doesn't have any context, then yeah, it looks shocking.
So if you don't mind,
We'll
I'll
keep
I'll
going.
jump to
Yeah.
a thought here, because this is probably the taboo, is to look at a salary line, just to be cautious.
By all means.
That's what we're here for.
And I'll jump to line 208, because it's probably it's a special ed Eastcon tuition.
Yes,
It's
it's
like 83%, but this one is $125,000 increase.
Right, so that's
Rate
what
increase,
Two oh
they
eight.
changed their rate this
Control
year.
over
I
that.
think I heard Melinda say that a week or two ago. that Eastcon-
They went up 8%.
So Eastcon tuition, they sent out a notice about 3 weeks ago. They went up 8%. That obviously doesn't drive an 83% increase. What drives the 83% increase above and beyond the 8% fee increase is the additional spending, and this is essentially another place that outplacements show up.
Okay, so that's,
So Eastcon runs an outplace school, and we have kids there. I forget if it's 2 or 3.
I think it's 3.
And that's over the budget. Because remember, when we do the budget in special education, the board has made the decision that we're gonna budget based on what we have currently, which is why, as Justin mentioned, late in the game last year, we had a $300,000 jump because we had kids move in at the very end of the year who would be in the number this year because we're talking about last year. So that's why that increased, and that's why.
If I may, Rick.
Go ahead, Jeff.
If I may, one of the other things on that I'd like to bring up is outplacement being a good thing, but external tuition that we have no control over, right? So anybody who talks about outplacing the entire high school, that's exactly what happens. The receiving school could decide an 8%, 10%, 20% tuition increase and then a special assessment on top of it, which has happened recently in the area, and we get stuck with it. So we would get stuck with it. So Rick, I just want to be clear that some of those outplacement lines, some of those, you'll see some tuition lines in here. Those are those lines that whenever they go up, we've got to get that money from somewhere else in our budget it gets pulled from. So I just want to make sure that we were clear on outplacements. What we consider outplacements today, a lot of them are in pupil services. If we were ever to even consider outplacing our high school, those would be general education outplacements, and on top of that, there's the special education outplacement that would fall in. So.
And I'll miss a few, but there was a thought. So if I look at line 97, hopefully I didn't go to it. There's only 11% increase, $138,000. It's MS general salary. So
No.
go ahead. I didn't
Go ahead,
look at
Bill, you
how
can
many
explain that
people
one
that
too.
is.
16.
So there are 16 positions, and what a great idea to add the number of positions.
2 years ago.
So it's a little different between the three schools. In elementary and middle, the teachers that have their own account are interestingly enough, art, music, phys ed. The remaining general ed teachers show up in an account called, it's MS general salary here, it's ES general salary in the elementary school. So that's all the other teachers. So that's why that increase is there. Now, I'm 100% certain no one's getting an 11% raise. But what you're seeing is if a teacher left the district and market forces caused us to hire a teacher at a higher rate, we are now budgeting for that teacher at the higher rate.
Okay.
So that contributes to that 11%. So there are 16 individuals that are making up that flux, and Melinda, I'd be willing to bet that whenever we have to replace a teacher, it's very rare that we're replacing them at a lower cost than the outgoing teacher.
Because the number of applicants for a position, we'll use music for example, are scarce. And then you get into a bidding war with another district, right? So at the end of the day, I agree with you that 11% are some of those teachers that I've hired at a higher rate of pay than the teacher who left. The problem is, if we had a better pool of applicants, it would be easier to hire the less expensive teacher, but you also have to know you get what you pay for sometimes.
I mean, you see that with
Some-
the elementary line here for
Yeah.
music.
Some of that would be being able to hire some of the younger teachers that are fresh out of school, but they don't want to take the risk on a district that may not have a job for them next year.
Correct.
Kristen?
Does that also include like steps? Maybe some of those teachers are advancing a step.
Absolutely,
Yes.
So
yes.
I don't know. if
That's how the
knows
raises
about
for
that.
the teachers show up until the top step where it's a flat rate
General
every
wage
year,
increase.
right.
Yeah.
And then coming from industry world, like when I look at a lot and I see 3% and I hear it's contractually agreed to increases, blah, blah, blah. I see a lot of 3%, 4%. But then when I see a line that's not 10%, 20, 30, 40% increase on a salary line, something just seems off. So, and that's why I'm at least asking,
No.
because
No,
other
it's
people are
great.
gonna.
Nope, we'd
Rick,
rather have
please.
you
Well,
ask.
listen to it. So let's just look, it's right here, line 128. I see it is 3 people. I just looked that up. But it's 46% increase, it's $85,000 increase over last year, and it's a reading specialist salary.
Right, and I
Yeah.
believe,
So it sounds
Melinda,
like
we,
that's a toughie.
I think we added a new,
Added a teacher.
we
Yeah,
added a
we
teacher
added-
there.
We added, no, so the year before, we cut a reading teacher and it had a devastating impact on the middle school, so last year we put it back.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Or this year we
So
put it
that's-
back.
Yeah.
So you went from
This is what
2
happens.
to 3.
2 to 3, right.
Yep.
And is that within that other list at all, or the other sheet that you sent out,
Of potential cuts?
potential cuts? The answer is no, I would imagine.
I didn't put any.
No,
reading
she
takes
didn't
that back
include
out
any reading
instead of keeping it
interventionists
in.
on that.
Gotcha. So then, I mean, we could do that for another hour. It's probably not worth it. I did see how big the increases are when you get down to pupil services,
Yes.
sewer, utilities, just like every other household in the town, we're gonna take a hit.
Yep.
I saw like 30% up, 40% up. Electric, heating oil, you did a nice job there. And then, so I'll just kind of leave it. If the townsfolk look at it, they'll say, yeah, they've looked at it. And I can tell you, I looked at every line. And I went back 2 and 3 times, and I'm going, oh my gosh, so something's up 20,000 or 100,000, whatever. I kind of thought it's right to come and question you.
Oh,
we're here for it.
Absolutely.
That's why we're here, right? So the only other thing I was curious, because again, looking at the roll-up, the idea of special ed versus the operating expenses of the school is hidden. It's the only way that I could say it, it's hidden, because it's in there. It's in the ingredients of what this is. But I was kind of curious, well, I
No,
don't,
don't
or is
use
it,
that word.
is it not hidden? Is it not?
Nothing.
Is it,
It's hidden.
Nothing is
I don't see it, I
So-
don't see,
so-
well,
so,
the
I'm sorry, what was
pupil-
your question again?
So, what I'm
Not a pattern.
getting to is there's a way to split it. You're talking about special ed can change $250,000 this month.
Right.
We know what we believe it's gonna cost to run the school other than special ed.
Correct.
All right, so say that's 5 million, but special ed could be 10 million. The question is it a way to present this when there's a roll-up at some point that says, this is what we need to run the place, this is the volatile part,
Yeah.
and you need to
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
when they
you
come
do.
back and say, cut $500,000 out, and we said, well, pupil services could change that next month, next quarter.
Tomorrow.
Is it easier, because I've heard this, and I remember Rob Wurge talking about it, and the things, like even with the capital expenditures, you have to have a rainy day fund. So in this case, you have to have a pocket of money to handle this. You can start by what you know it is. And then can we afford in the budget to say it's gotta be another 200,000 more than that?
So the volatility really appears in the pupil services line. And that's if you're on the summary page,
Now I
the
see
4th
it
line down.
correctly, yeah.
So it is
Segregated.
It's
or
it's separated, right? And then if you go to the following 8 pages, pupil services begins on page 4, line 176, and you can go account by account,
Oh, yeah.
and you'll see it
218.
pops up in all the areas we talk about. Outplacements, there's a pupil services account, which is actually things like RBTs, and we ought to change that to contracted services is probably the better description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The accountants get a little touchy when you start messing with account names and numbers, as Erica mentioned. But you can see there, a lot of the money is there in pupil services, and then EastCon on the next page on line 208, which we already talked about, is really just another bucket of outplaced services.
I never knew why that was separate and it wasn't just folded into outplaced.
Right, and
But
I wonder if once upon a
That-
time, that's
correct.
where our outplaced kids went.
we were
And-
part of
A consortium, that's
it's a
right,
consortium
Yep.
thing.
and that's gone away.
So,
Well,
sorry, no, didn't know.
So I apologize for
Oh,
that,
no.
but I see it more clearly
No
now.
Okay.
I apologize for that, but it makes sense.
Yep.
So when folks say it's not there, it's there.
No, it's
Right.
there.
All
And
there.
and I think I helped to clarify that.
Yes.
So, and that, when you look, is nearly 13% of this budget.
Mhm.
Yes, the increase.
So
right.
folks need to
Yep.
understand.
Yes.
A 13% increase for next year.
Right, and
That's what it says. It would be.
and which is
over
not
last year.
far from where we were last year, to Justin's point earlier
Yeah.
tonight. And then late in the game, we had some students move in that needed additional
Pop
services.
that around.
And all of a sudden
Sorry.
we were at
That's okay.
about 700,000, and then when all of a sudden we were over $1 million in the blink of an eye.
Okay, Kristen?
I just wanted to say, so Rick, we can't have like a rainy day fund. You have to like legally budget for what we know like right now.
Right.
So we can't say like, oh, special education is always really expensive, so we're gonna put in an extra $500,000. Like that, you can't.
On pupil
Yeah.
services.
On
On
anything.
anything.
Well, on the day it's finally
That-
there,
yeah.
well, we
Then
gotta
it's
do
too-
something
it-
on the
yeah.
capital. Because otherwise you'll never get to FY
Right.
27, 28,
Which is
29.
what we kind of tried
Which
to
is
do
what
with the
we've
town.
tried to do.
One time.
We tried to budget for the lockers and
Yep.
put money aside
Right.
so that we could then pull that money once enough
Yeah.
money was there to actually do the project, but then the money isn't there.
So,
I need clarification on how that
Yeah,
works, because that is muddy.
but you'll never get it done if we can't
Right.
have the
That's-
funds, like those other, what do you call the other funds, the lapse
The
funds?
non-lapsing.
The non-lapsing,
yeah.
Non-lapsing funds.
Now, just so
If we
you
can't
understand,
feed
the
that,
only,
no.
the
No.
only way money gets into the non-lapsing accounts is if we finish the year under budget, which people, I can hear it now,
Challenge.
that never
Never
happens.
happened.
Well, 2 years ago it did,
Yeah.
because things
Yeah.
actually broke our way a little bit in
Kids
special
moved-
ed that year.
Kids moved out that had an out-of-district
So
placement.
we often hear, oh, they're all, the kids only move in, they never move out. That's not true. It does happen, it's just,
Doesn't happen often.
it doesn't happen often, and
They move out and more move
the
in.
other thing that's going on here is, and Erica mentioned it again, also, the cost skyrocketing is very real. So the severity of those costs helps, unfortunately offsets when folks do move out. I'm gonna go on a rant, guys, sorry. The rainy day fund cannot be housed at the Board of Ed.
Okay.
The rainy day fund for the school and the town resides in the town's surplus. And the only way, if you guys go to the town meetings, you'll hear us carry on about this all the time. The guidance for town surplus is 16.7%. Boy, Bill, that's awfully precise. That's a couple months' worth of expenses. So we, 4 or 5 years ago, were at 5. We have battled up to just under 10. Unfortunately, if we run deficits, that deflates that surplus and we're headed right down to 5. Hopefully not any lower, because 5 is sort of this threshold where the state doesn't come zooming in and take over, but they really start to pay attention and ask questions, and you're headed towards potential loss of local control, which would be devastating for our mill rate. At that point, nobody wants to go there. So, as I always try to advocate for, when we're budgeting revenues, I like to be conservative, maybe slightly low, and we're budgeting expenses, I like to be conservative, maybe slightly high, because something is always going to swing. The class, we were talking about it earlier tonight. Town side, we're 2/3 of the way through our salt and sand budget, and it's not even February yet. So, and I don't know if you've seen the weather for
weekend.
Sunday. I got a feeling it's going to take another hit. So, by adopting that approach over the long term, you hope that when you get hit somewhere else, you had a net of other areas to kind of cover it. Last year, great example, tough winter on salt and sand again, but our Board of Finance had had taken steps to put an appropriate amount of money in the contingency fund, and that money, almost dollar for dollar, ended up offsetting the salt and sand overage. If we hadn't had that, we would have been cooked, which helped preserve sort of heading down the right road on surplus. So I guess I'm trying to explain why we can't do it within the Board of Finance, but we certainly can do it as a town by budgeting appropriately and having some also a level of fiscal discipline too, which I think is anybody who participates in these meetings, that's certainly the goal.
Okay. Daniela.
2 things. Are all of our tuitions for outplacements been given to us? We
Yes.
have EastCon, do we have whatever other schools?
As of,
Like, we know what they are.
as of last week, yes, the number we gave you last week was accurate. We've had some changes along the way, and we have a change today. I don't know what that number is. So, I mean, we can certainly calculate that for the next time, so we get a real number for you on how it went up from the 274 that we were in FY '26 deficit to what it really is now. We should have hard numbers probably by next week, once we identify the placement for the students.
Okay. And the second thing, Bill, I believe you've already done it before. May be worth doing again. Will anyone look? Will anybody care? You use Excel, correct?
I do.
I love
Just a
Excel.
little.
I love me
Just
some
a little.
Excel. I still am too old school, right? I use Excel. Is it worth maybe highlighting, because as Rick said, he didn't quite notice people services directly, right? That's a hard dollar, they're contractual. Is it worth just highlighting in yellow all the contractuals so people can see this is all contractual? We can't touch any of this.
Well,
but if you'd like to find me something in this not contractual to cut, let us know.
It's interesting because the board has done that, not on
Yeah.
these sheets of paper, but in the
In
coming
past,
weeks,
yeah.
you'll have the distinct pleasure of going through the PowerPoint deck that is used to present the town, the budget to the town. And we actually have a slide or two. There it is.
Yep, there it is.
That gets to exactly what you're saying.
This is
I
last
know
year.
as we look at it here, I highlighted everything in yellow. Salary, you know what I mean? I was like, these are all the things. And then I went back and looked and went, yeah, where, what? So
And that's
it
really
could
what
be
that
helpful
slide
to
says.
other people if they want to look line by line
Right.
and say, okay, this can't be touched. Because even if we look at something that's an increase of 100%, you still can't touch it because it's contractual. I don't know. It could probably just mean nothing, but maybe it would help one or two people. It's easy to highlight a row in yellow on Excel.
Right.
Easier than other things that you could have to
Sure.
do. I don't know.
Matt?
To educate Rick a little bit, and also anybody else who's online who wants to pay attention. We have these capital things that we want to do, we need to do. Some things need more than others, but so we do budget for them in a lot of years. This year, we haven't. And so, but what happens is, it's, $200,000 for these capital or maintenance things, and then when Melinda says, "Hey, somebody moved into town," I said, "I guess we're not painting the lockers this year because the
Yep.
money's got to come from. The money can't come from anywhere else now. It's over the. I've been looking at these budgets I've been on the board for 4 years, but I've been looking at these budgets. My daughter was in kindergarten, so 15 years essentially, and there's always something. A lot of these budget items, you might want to call it a wish list. It's not a wish list, it's necessities, but essentially it's a wish list because we don't have the money. A lot of these things have been budgeted for 15 years,
Oh, sure.
my 15 years, if not more, and they get deferred and deferred and deferred and deferred. And now, once things start exploding and caving in, it can't be deferred anymore. And so, this 1.9 or call it 2.2 or 2.3 increase that we have this year is going to be nothing compared to what happens when something major happens that we can't not fix. So, some of these things,
The generator,
the generator or,
the
yeah.
cafeteria.
So at some point, and we have a little bit of money in these non-lapsing accounts that we're gonna that we are going to essentially eviscerate to pay for these things that have to be done. Replacing 70-year-old equipment, 70-year-old
Yeah,
equipment.
I looked at it. She nicely put the years,
Yes,
how
she
old
did.
they
So,
are.
They serve their
if we were replacing 5-year-old equipment because we bought the wrong thing or because something failed because we bought cheap stuff, that'd be 70-year-old equipment.
Yeah.
Or a
Doesn't know you
20-something-year-old
want anything.
generator.
Doesn't know you want anything.
Some 20-something-year-old generator is not designed to last as long as we've been nursing it along. So, but anytime we have something, a special ed just kind of gobbles it up because we have to legally pay for those things. We don't have to legally paint lockers, except when we do
Correct.
because
Right,
of our
right.
accreditation.
We just get rid of
So
it.
we used to have, when I first came, you didn't have a painting cycle, then we developed a
Right.
painting cycle, and every year, each school got to pick 2 or 3 classrooms to paint, and we were humming along. And then we got into trouble with the budget, and that was the first thing. We haven't painted a classroom in years. And so we're back to, if you go in the classrooms, the walls are dirty, it looks gross. You know, learning environment matters to student achievement, believe it or not. And so, yeah, the things are starting to look dingy again. You know, we've had a few custodians go around and like, especially here in the middle school where the bottom is red, it chips easily, you know, they'll touch it up for me at night. But, I mean, you don't want it to look awful. The environment needs to be kept up. But
This isn't
we haven't
Bridgeport.
painted
We
classrooms
shouldn't-
in years.
We shouldn't look like we're in a war zone. This isn't Bridgeport. I've never been in a school in Bridgeport. I've driven through Bridgeport, and I wouldn't want my kids to go to school there, and we shouldn't, you know, I'm not knocking on Bridgeport specifically. I've just driven through there, and it looks like a war zone. It's a nice little town, and we shouldn't subject our kids to third world conditions.
Justin?
Sorry.
Yep, you're okay.
No, I don't want to drag this out any longer. But Rick and Daniela, I suggest you guys pull up last year's.
I'll have Danielle send it.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Our budget presentation from last year,
Yeah, I've looked
like
at
we
it
went line by line by line,
Oh, I
and
remember
then
last year.
consolidated, and I think this slide even more so pulls it together better than anything else we could even articulate here in a meeting, and that's that there was $500,000 worth of budget drivers, and then there was $1.2 million of a budget driver on top of that. And it's a scale, it's a magnitude of scale thing. If we were able to go year for year and say, oh, yep, we can just do a 2% increase or a 1% increase, great, we can predict that, we can do it. But last year, I think we all grunted simultaneously when the $277,000 hit us the day before we went to present. It was like, where are we going to get that from? And my fear, Matt said it last year, and I'm going to say it this year, we do the best we can to minimize every bit of any waste, fraud, and abuse, if you will, in this budget, and there is none. And then it goes to the Board of Finance, and the Board of Finance does their thing to it, and we get it back, and kids lose.
Yep.
Every year since I've been on the board, we get it back, and kids lose. It's not anybody else that loses, it's the kids. And we've got a capital budget cycle here that we've asked for because the town has asked for us to show them a 5-year plan of where we need to go, so we never get in the HVAC situation again, where we've got to bond out and pray for state grants. We're going to be doing it again
Yep.
because we can't plan for any of it.
Yep.
Okay. Any other budget discussion?
And I just want to say one thing. The years that we had ARPA money here, we applied a lot of expenses like sub-coverage and things that were allowable expenses under ARPA by using that grant money those years. And so that's how we kind of got through the deficit that special ed was causing during those years, right? We were able to apply some of those grants to our operating budget. Now we're at a situation, there's hardly any grant money out there. And so there's no other pocket of money that can offset some of these costs. And so that's all gone. And I think that's how we survived those few years in between. And then we started to see, again, the escalating costs in special ed. And, we've made cuts, and I mentioned this last week. The reason we have to go for supplemental is because the equipment and the supplies and things that we would not buy covered those costs. Well, guess what? We cut those all out last year before the budget was ever finalized, so they're gone. So we're in a bad place.
Can I just chime in? I did a lot in the last few days anyway on ChatGPT, trying to help follow up with what you're doing, what Melinda has talked about. And it looked like everything that ChatGPT, including for Connecticut, what magic button, I wanted to ask Erica, what magic button can we push And you guys, you folks, excuse me, seem to be pushing all those buttons it says are out there. The only other thing I think we're missing is gonna be greater support from our population, general population. So as we talked about communication, we need 100,000 people writing those emails you asked
Correct.
about.
Yep.
And letters to the reps, including Chris Stewart and stuff, the folks we helped to put in office to get the funding out there that they said they were gonna do, which is the hard part. So I don't know where the funding's going to, but it's not coming back to what they said they were gonna do to begin with. So I do wanna say, great job. Appreciate you bringing in Erica. It helped me see a lot of the pieces better. And all we have to do is, we gotta find more funding. I know you're trying. I gotta figure out, personally, I'm trying to figure out how on earth we make it happen better than it is, if it's even possible. Other than taxes on automobiles and land and private houses. But that seems to be, when you look at what it says you can do, that's the only thing you can do. So when the folks do come back and say, you can't have another $1 million in the mill rates, that's where we're stuck. Because that's the only
Exactly.
thing allowed for us to do. And I've been listening for 6 months or so now, and that you've been saying it. And I've been listening, and I've done further research, and that's all there is. I appreciate you letting me pose those
Yep.
lines by lines, and somebody else is gonna look at it too. And I feel bad if I see the list that it's like, oh, well, the only chance to cut $1 million out is you wipe out part of our education system. That's, after everything you've done, that's pretty hard to take.
Yeah.
I know it's hard for you. It's hard to think we can't do it, but thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
For anybody who did the math off of Erica's presentation, if that base economic cost sharing base ratio was accounted for inflation today at that almost $16,000, that is $3.4 million that Thompson would have been receiving for this year alone, never mind over the course of the years. That's $3.4 million to the residents who are listening that would not be accountable to your property taxes if you would please reach out to your legislators.
Yeah.
Can we post their links on our website?
As far as the information and where to write to?
How
yes,
to
we
write to
could.
your legislators? Here's their links,
I
here's
did
their
give-
email, here's their
Yep.
phone.
Can we also post that
Presentation? I gave a digital copy to Danielle, so she's got it.
as
Yes,
part of our,
we
as part
can.
of our budget drop down on the website?
As a matter of fact, I had planned on writing to the families to give them an update of where we're at with the budget at the end of the week. I will put that, we
Yeah.
have posted that information. And we really need an advocacy around pressure from Thompson.
And I'm gonna get on my soapbox about the advocacy piece one more time. The advocacy piece can't just come from the Board of Education. It has to come top down from town leadership. So that is the boards of selectmen working together in the district. That is the Board of Finances reaching out across the aisles to their own other Board of Finances in the district. That's us reaching out to other boards, which we have. I'm working with Putnam, Killingly, Pomfret, Scotland, Chaplin, Woodstock. And I've put out the feelers also to Ashford, Union, Coventry, Canterbury, Sprague, Plainfield, and whoever else is in Arcabe District 4. I have reached out to every single one of them. I've reached out to Senator Flexer. I did get a phone call back. She's in a group that is supposed to be working on the economic cost sharing base ratio formula. That's on one of their things. I did hear from Senator Gordon. I'm trying to get him to come into a meeting with the board chairs. And then there has not been a response from Representative Stewart.
Really?
Kristen?
I'm gonna piggyback off of that because I attended the CABE legislative breakfast. There was one legislator there who does not represent our district. So when your legislators don't show up and do the things they're supposed to do, hold them accountable. We reached out to some of their offices. May responded, and I think Gordon.
She called me the same day.
Yeah, so Stewart didn't. but hold those people accountable. Like, they're getting paid to sit in offices. They don't show up to vote. And when an education bill does come across some of them, they're voting it down. Like, it's our job to email them, text them, call them constantly, because one letter doesn't do anything. But if everybody's doing it all the time, eventually something has to be done about it. That's all.
Justin?
Yeah, when we post this, I think it needs a little bit of context, because I can see this slide right
there was
here
a couple
Yes.
slides,
Yeah.
I was like, oh god.
taking us to,
Yeah.
but if you look at the highlighted data that I put below it,
Right.
it explains everything you need to explain. We are 23-ish% above Pomfret when it comes to low income, which we know directly correlates to services. Students with disabilities, we're on average about 5%. I mean, the number is there and it's explained, and with what we're doing in our district with that, with those demographics, we've done a damn good job at where we are.
And our local funding is the lowest.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Are we done on the budget discussion?
Yes,
Five,
please.
yes.
Okay, so now we're moving on to number 6, a potential budget adjustment. Do we have a motion to make any changes to the budget as was previously sent to the Board of Finance?
Well, we didn't send it yet with a formal letter.
Okay.
So, I'm not gonna make the motion at this time. Only because if I did, it would be to add 380,000 to where we sat 2 weeks ago, based on everything that's come in over the last 2 weeks.
Is that an accurate number?
Oh,
As of today.
and I'll give you the background.
Give you a little
I'll give you the background
Yep.
that I have. That's the $160,000 pupil service
Yep.
outplacement. That's the $48,000 in the lockers, the $72,000 serving line, the $32,000 steamer, and a $68,000 truck.
That's the increase over last time.
Over this.
That would be the
Or the
increase
previous-
over the 1.932,
Yeah.
358. That's just what's hit us in the last 2 weeks. And we have an aging building.
And we just got a new
Yeah.
referral today for outpatient.
So, that's all I gotta say.
Mr. Stecklitz?
I don't know if I'm out of line here or not. If I am, tell me to pause. May I suggest that you consider a motion to rescind, to call it back from sending it to the Board of Finance, to allow the board to react to some of these issues that we're dealing with, both to the good and to the bad, in terms of high or lower for the budget. I really feel that anchoring on a number right now is premature because the budget's still developing. The budget process is designed to allow both a vetting of what's in there, a la Rick, and time for some of these things to develop. Our actuaries were a week early, so I had that bit of bad news on the pension a week earlier than we normally would. Actuaries it's all black magic, so it takes a little time to get those reports turned around. And there will be more. I hope for, once again, I hope for good news on health insurance. I can't promise it, but I hope for it. And I think it would behoove you guys to be able to react to those things either way. All right.
Melinda?
So I don't know how I feel about that comment, but I can say this, that it's not gonna be less than 1.9, because we've already gone through that procedure. Do I think that you might wanna think about adding those additional costs that we're facing? We don't have a hard number on that, and I think we need to get that. But the reality here is, it's not gonna be less than 1.9. And I just want everybody to understand that you can tell me and take this crazy list I put together, which is not even a list, right? It is just a decimation of Thompson Public Schools. And sure, we may have to come to that, because along the way, I think we all know around this table that it's going to be a hard sell unless our parents come out and advocate for the budget, that we're going to actually receive 1.9 million at the very least. So I don't know how I feel about that, but what I want to say is that the budget I gave you is the minimum.
Kathleen?
Yes, I think we were a little rash last week in making that motion and agreeing to that motion. I would like to wait until the directors have gone through their budgets and explained their numbers to us. It may very well be the 1.9. It may be higher, depending on what we hear next week. So I would like to make the motion that we do rescind our decision to send this exact number to the Board of Finance, and that we wait until we have firmed up the budget a little more before we do decide on an actual number.
I second that.
Kristen beat you to it. All right, all those in favor to rescind the budget as was previously presented, we'll go around the table. Amanda?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Daniela?
No.
Kristen?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Yes.
Heather?
Yeah.
No.
And I'm going to abstain.
Can I vote?
Oh, sorry, Kathleen. One
Yes.
of these days I'll get it. Okay, so moving on from that, citizens' comments. We'll start in the room. Nobody. Quiet. On the Zoom.
Motion passes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, motion passed. Anybody in the chat? I know that there was.
I'd like to make a comment if I can.
Mr. Wurge.
Yep, Rob Wurge, 452 Lowell Davis Road. I actually have a few comments. I'll try to make it as brief as possible given the time. I want to start by saying that I understand and acknowledge the challenge and the situation that we're in as a community. I also want to thank the Board of Education for your consideration this evening, for changing the plans on the fly, and for your time and energy, and also for rescinding the last vote to anchor down on the budget. I think there's a huge perception potential or a perception issue around that, and I think opening it up speaks a lot to the meeting that we're going to have on Monday as a joint group, and to the community at large. There's no easy button, right? There's no easy answer. If there was, we would have found it a long time ago. And these are basic things that we've been challenged with year over year. And just to draw a little color around the town, in addition to the challenges with the Board of Ed budget, we pulled a significant amount of money out of the paving budget for the town last year. And what that means is now every dollar we add, it's a year over year increase, because you've kind of changed the baseline by gutting it the prior year. The fire departments, we've seen what's evolved in the community around the fire departments and the trajectory that the fire departments are on. They're significantly underfunded, and there's more that needs to happen for them. Probably one of the toughest winters we've had. We've gotten lulled into these mild winters, and little at a time, we've inched our salt and sand budget down. So this year, not only are we going to spend our whole budget, we're probably going to deplete our full inventory. Prior years, we go into the winter with an inventory of salt and sand. So that's another headwind. The HVAC, significant cost. That bond is coming forward, and we're going to start to have payments on that in fiscal 27. So I bring those up not as doom and gloom, but just as it's just a perfect storm of a multitude of challenges in front of us, as a town. Bill commented on the surplus. The surplus is sacred, right? Had we not responded to the surplus when we did, when it was at 5.2, and then we have a year like we're having this year where we know special ed's running over, we'd be dipping down into 4%, 3.5%, exactly where none of us want to be as a town. So I thank God that we actually put the focus and energy to push that up for situations like this. I kind of cringe a little on rainy day. It's really not a rainy day fund. It's not a fund to just do things for of choice. It's a fund to do things that happen to us as a town that we're responsible for and we need to do. So I'd end with saying, we need to advocate for sure and educate, and that's across all the leadership in the town, and get people out to vote, right? We need to get people out to vote and support our town, and that sits on everyone and all the boards and commissions. And then I'll just end with this. I mean, my heart breaks for our school, for our town, for our community. I can speak as Rob Works from the Board of Finance. I can speak as Rob Works as a citizen, and I care and want what's good for this town. And we're in a tough spot, and it's going to be a tough year. And I'll just end with thanking you again. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the openness to kind of dig into it, and I look forward to getting together on Monday the 26th, hearing the presentations, and deep diving again into the budget. I know that was long, but thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Bill.
you.
That's well.
Thanks, Rob.
G had her hand up first.
Okay. Amanda G, you had your hand up.
Hello, Amanda Godding, 21 Rachel Drive. I'm an elementary school parent whose child is going into the middle school next year. I was actually typing in the chat because I wasn't sure if it would just be easier for me to ask. Is there someone I could email to ask questions about some of the topics that's come up in the Board of Education meetings, things that have changed, items that my son has told me is going on or not being addressed as to maintenance in his school, without wasting anyone's time? And thank you to all the board members for being here. I really do appreciate your time.
So I would direct you to refer those emails direct to Superintendent Smith. Her email's right on the website.
Oh, no problem. I definitely have her information. Thank you so
Okay,
much,
thank you.
Melinda.
Yes, I'll be happy to chat with you.
Thank you. Have a great night, all.
You too. Thank you. Sarah. There we go.
Hi. Hello, Sarah Desjardins, 210 Pompeo Road. So I first have to say ditto to exactly what Rob had stated. Education is so important. Me being also a special education teacher, I can see it from both ends and both perspectives. And I heard at the beginning of your meeting that there is possibility of getting rid of a pre-K teacher and also a para, which makes my heart like cry. They are the foundation to our education for our students. And my question that I had put in the chat, I didn't realize, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had to wait till citizens' comments. My apologies on that. But my question is, is the district still NIAC accredited? And if so, wouldn't that mean that there has to be a certain amount of students in each of the preschool classrooms, and they can't have above a certain level or a certain amount of students in each of those classrooms? And also with that NIAC grant or accreditation, they also have special requirements that make it necessary for that amount of preschool students. I just was curious if we are still accredited as a district.
Yes, we are accredited. We went through that process last year, and the team at Mary R. Fisher came out with very good scores in our accreditation visit. There's not a necessary minimum number of students that need to be in each class. However, they give a recommended class size. We're not exceeding that in any way at this point in time, but we are accredited. Obviously, we want to have a good group of students in each classroom, right?
Correct.
So there's opportunities for them to socialize and learn play skills and navigate life. And so NIAC does give you a specified range of recommendations for each classroom. Right now, like I said, we're not exceeding class size limits. I don't believe there's actual minimum, but if you think about it rationally, right, you want enough children so that they can interact with one another.
Correct. Right. Okay. Excellent. And does NIAC also provide grants to the district as well to help fund some of these preschool programs?
No, they're an accreditation body, right? They come in and evaluate the program.
Gotcha.
They don't provide grants. They might offer PD opportunities for our teachers, but not specific funding.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much for your time and a wonderful job on the whole board. Thank you so much for caring about our education for our students.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else on Zoom? All right, then I'm gonna call for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
And we're done. Thank you.
It's like rapid fire.